Let's welcome everyone to another episode of Musashi R&D and M&H Sessions.
Yep.
Today we're going to be looking at training periodization.
What is that?
Do we have a periodic table to show the viewers?
Do you know every element on the periodic table?
I mean, I know of them.
Name the first.
Not personally.
Name the first five.
Hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, carbon.
You're such a fucking
Get out, nerd. Nerds rule the world. So love the nerds. Training periodization, though, important for everyone. Probably overlooked by nearly everyone as well. I would say, unless you're like a professional athlete, most people training aren't doing periodized training programs. So we should probably explain what a periodized program is, right?
Please, quick description.
Well, in powerlifting, like periodization is the language of powerlifting. If you don't train with periodization, you're doing something wrong.
So let's just use powerlifting as an example, right? So you're doing your training all year round. How far out before you start to implement some sort of programming designed to peak at a certain event? Are you like doing 12 weeks out, 16 weeks out, less?
Well, it depends how long you have. Some people work with 20-week, periodization. Some people look at the calendar year and mark a 52-week periodization. It depends on your level of commitment. Some people sign up for a comp 8 weeks before it and download the internet program, and sometimes that's still periodization.
So periodization is basically breaking down your training into smaller sort of meso, micro, macro blocks of training specific to a certain goal that you're looking to achieve in that block.
But why?
So it might be different for powerlifting. That might be sort of a different example, right? You're training to peak on a certain day on certain movements where you're lifting the most amount of weight, whereas a rugby league player might periodize their program via off-season, pre-season, in-season, depending on what the sort of the goal is for them.
And how would you say that benefits over a more traditional style of exercise or weightlifting? Just kind of lifting to your max every now and then, trying to just get better naturally without any kind of...
Well, you're setting a goal, right? So if you're if you're a rugby league player and you're noticing you're getting out-muscled on the field, or you're not explosive enough, not fast enough for your position, off-season, pre-season, you need to be focusing on your weaknesses. So that's where a periodized program can come into play as well to help improve some of your weaknesses. So for an example, you might need more explosivity. So you might focus off-season on power and explosiveness. And as the season rolls around, you might focus a bit on sort of speed training, or before the season on speed training. And then the season might just be about agility and conditioning.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's different types of periodized programs, even with bodybuilding.
But why?
To achieve a certain outcome without getting because it can become fragmented. It's really hard to achieve multiple different outcomes or goals.
Exactly. So periodization is a balance between fitness and fatigue, right? Like what Mark said, why don't you just train all the time to lift your max? Because, well, if you lift your max every day, you're not going to be able to, right? If you try to squat your max weight every day, you're not going to be able to, right? So that's fatigue overwhelming your fitness, right? But if you if you don't train, like if you train once a week, you're kind of always ready, to lift your max, because you're not going to be suffering from any fatigue, although, you're going to be weaker because you haven't, built up over time.
But apply that to sport as well. A different time in the year, you're also going to have a different level of competitiveness, and there's also more or less importance. So you're training for the postseason. That's obviously going to be far more important than the preseason. And therefore your training needs to adapt to that.
Probably the most extreme example of periodization is like an Olympic athlete, where they actually periodize a program over 4-year blocks. Wow. So they're aiming to build and build and build to peak at one day after a 4-year programming. So
and most elite athletes tend to do that, right? Even if their coach is implementing it on them, or for example, if you're a professional fighter, you got a fight camp. That's a periodized plan, right? You do what you do at the start of the camp is different from what you do at the end of the camp. If you're a powerlifter, where there's weights on the bar, and your sport is weights, where you can measure what you're doing, and it's a tangible thing, then periodization becomes very clear, right? So like you mentioned, macrocycles, mesocycles, microcycles. macro cycles is like longer term, thinking of a few months. Meso cycles is like 2 to 3 months. What you do every 2 to 3 months might have a specific
I think
function.
you're getting micro and meso mixed up. Meso is the smaller one.
No, micro is the smallest one. Now, this is what you do even within those 2 to 3 months, like in 1 to 2 weeks, what you vary within the meso cycle. Micro, meso, macro. Macro is the biggest picture.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So in terms of someone, just a normal sort of gym goer, I still would recommend some periodization for people in the gym, depending on what your goal is. But the way I sort of used to look at it was, okay, this block I want to get more powerful. This block I want to get stronger. This block I want to build muscle, hypertrophy. And this block I want to work on muscular endurance.
It sounds like, I only just recently learned about periodization, but it sounds like what it's for is leading up to a certain, like it seems competition based almost, like it's leading up to a certain date to complete a weight or a competition, say in the Olympics.
Correct.
How recently? Like in the last 5 minutes?
24, 30 seconds ago.
But it can be, but
Yeah.
it can even be as simple as, okay, I'm in the gym, I'm doing the exact same routine.
Yeah.
There's different ways that you can sort of
Yeah.
work this periodization. You could start on 15 reps on all the same movements. You do that for 4 weeks or whatever. Another 4 weeks, you
Interesting.
drop down to 12 to 10, with the end goal of sort of getting stronger so that when you start that periodization program again, you're starting with a heavier weight than you did in the first block. So it doesn't have to be, it can be the smallest elements that you're actually mixing up, or you can change the whole program up completely.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's interesting. Good on.
But
Yeah.
it's got to be based on what your goal is. You need to figure out, what is my goal. Okay, for the normal gym guy, it might be I want to lose weight, but I want to put on muscle. So there might be a period of, hey, I'm trying to get stronger and bigger to put on some muscle, and then I might go through a programming of trying to maintain that muscle while losing body fat.
Right.
That'd be the most standard one.
I'll give you an example, right? So, powerlifting, just because it's easy, because there's weights, right? So you're trying to lift as much weight as possible, right? So say you have a 16-week build up to this day that you're going to lift weights, right? So this is what's called linear periodization. So typically the first block of the first 4 weeks, you're going to do endurance training, right? Higher weights, higher reps, much lower weights, right? Just going to work on your general, strength and conditioning, your
Movement, technique.
Exactly. You're going to be doing a lot more reps, so your technique is going to build. Next block after endurance is going to be hypertrophy, right? Because to lift weights, you got to build muscle. So that's when you go down to this, say 8 to 12 rep range on a lot of movements, but the weights go up, compared to these the high reps that you're doing before. So lower reps, higher weights. So now you do that for 4 weeks, packed on some muscle. After that, right, next 4 weeks, strength, right? Strength is the most important thing for every sport. Agility, everything's related to your strength, right? So this is when you're doing even lower reps and even higher weights, right? So we're talking like 4 to 8, 4 to 8 reps, but quite heavier weights, right? Might even involve different rest regimes and things in there. Now say we're leading up to our 1 rep max, right? We're talking about powerlifting, lifting as much as you can. So your final block is going to be power, right? So your power block is 1 to 2 reps, right? In these 4 weeks, and you're going to be lifting 100%, 110% of what you started at the start of the 16 weeks, right? And then, then you're going to hit your max, right? Because then, you have a balance that you've built up of fitness and fatigue. You're not overly fatigued, right? Because you've built up to this, right? You're peaking naturally for this, right?
Yeah.
Trying to articulate it, but yeah.
Yeah, you're not wearing yourself out through the whole program, so you get to this event and you're just broken down.
So
you're trying to build in a way and stay as fresh as possible.
Yeah.
You got it down to a science, mate.
Well, that's the original form, right? Linear periodization.
And did each block, when you were sort of doing this, was generally 4 weeks?
Yeah, generally 4 weeks.
Yeah.
But see, after linear periodization, which is invented by the Russians, because they're very logical, very scientific people.
Logical people, right? With what's going on at the moment. Well, there's one illogical guy anyway.
The cosmonauts.
Topical.
We're talking cosmonauts.
Okay, yeah, very logical.
In the 70s, they sent a dog to space first, right?
That's important.
Yeah. After that, the late great Charles Poliquin, greatest strength coach of all time, in my opinion, he invented something called non-linear periodization or undulated periodization, right? So basically, this means you're not just simply going, you're not simply decreasing the reps and increasing the weight, right? Variety of weights, variety of exercises. It's this constant change in stimulus that's actually going to increase your strength, increase your, whatever you're trying to achieve. Now, Charles Poliquin took this from powerlifting, and he became a strength and conditioning coach for most of the major sports leagues in the world, right? NFL, like some of these NHL hockey teams, like some very high level athletes. And then from there came something called block periodization, right? So, this is probably the most applicable to sports. So sports, you don't want to, you peak multiple times throughout a season. So there's, varying, regimes that you're going to be doing throughout the season. Obviously off season, you got a clear goal throughout the season, right? You're almost building up every week to a match, but you got to balance it also with what your deficiencies are. Every player's got a different, different role in the team. Every player's got to build on skills, got to build on physicalness. Like,
some players could be rehabbing from injury. So
for some sports, you said that you just peak multiple times in a year, like maybe 3 or 4. But I compete in jiu-jitsu, which is quite a lot, multiple times a year. Is it possible to have this routine to maintain that peak?
It is, but it's a trade-off, right? Like you look at the best MMA fighters in the world, they're not fighting more than 5 times a year because they understand the build-up to the fight is as important as the fight,
so
right?
Would you say periodization is benefit for some types of athletes and maybe not so much for others, or is it something like a blanket training method that can be used for everyone?
I would say it can be applied to every sport.
I agree.
But it's different for every sport.
It's different for every sport, exactly.
I incorporate periodization in a very different way to you, for example. So I play in several different basketball comps, so there's different seasons throughout the year. It's essentially throughout. There's maybe a few weeks on and off here and there. Periodization for me is just more plyometrics and sprint training in the off season, and then just conditioning in general throughout the season.
Yeah.
That would probably be a general recommendation for all sports.
100%.
See, and what you're
strength, power
unintentionally
off
doing,
season, agility and conditioning during season.
endurance, hypertrophy, and power and strength, right?
Exactly.
And those are kind of the 4 main elements.
And it's to do with 2 different goals.
Yeah.
Off season, the goals are improve, whereas mid season, the goal is to maintain.
Yeah.
I think everyone, to keep their training program fresh, they should incorporate some sort of periodization with some sort of goal in mind. I think the most important thing if you're first doing it, or any time, you need to record your results. Otherwise, you get to the end of the block, you move on to the next block. When you originally come back to that first block, you need to know what your results were in order to improve those results.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Why?
I don't record my results, but I'm aware of my fitness level.
When you were training for powerlifting, very number-based?
That's the difference.
Well, I had very comprehensive spreadsheets
Yes.
to track all of this, right?
Yes. And I'd say most high-level trainers would have the same. The athlete probably not aware of it because they've got high-level trainers.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So,
But I think you need to record it in order to know the progress you're making and areas where you might not be improving as much.
Yeah. How do you know if you're getting faster from your sprints?
If you're not recording your times.
it's-
Does it matter?
for me, it's definitely more about fitness.
Right.
And if towards the end of the game, the 4th quarter, if I can perform the same as I can the 1st quarter.
But imagine if you
that's
were
the
tracking
goal.
your time and you were getting faster.
I'll give
Right.
you a different analogy. So instead of fitness, your vertical leap, you need to improve it. How are you going to improve it if you're not measuring it?
Fair point.
Yeah. So conditioning might be different because
Yeah.
conditioning's a bit different because that's based on sort of a bit more feel, right? I feel fitter. I'm getting through the game fresher. I've got more energy in the last quarter, last half, whatever. Whereas vertical leap is a measurable. You have to measure it in order to know if you're improving.
I'm not trying to improve my vertical leap.
No, I
Is the
know.
thing there.
Okay, well, it's just a different analogy, a different.
If you just want to be fit and play basketball, that's a different thing. If you want to be the best athlete you can be,
I already play above the
you
rim.
ever
I
heard?
don't think I need to jump in.
You ever heard the start of the Musashi ad? To improve performance must be measured.
Yeah. You got me there. You're essentially reading from our bio.
So I think we've established that periodization is a good thing if you are serious about your sport. I think, Mark, when you're saying about jiu-jitsu, I think you would definitely, if you wanted to do it properly, you would pick events at the beginning of the year, right? And you'd block it in a way where, 12 weeks leading into the event, I'm going to work on my whatever it is, right? when I'm not sort of in that peaking for an event period, I'm going to work on this.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's secret periodization that a lot of people do. They don't even realize, like like weight cutting and weight gaining. Like that's your training influences that, right? And even bulking and shredding. Shredding for summer is the type of periodization that people don't know about.
Look at Gordon Ryan's recent match against Felipe Pena. He periodized, maybe not his training, but his hormone regime. No.
Well, on that
he got
note,
bigger leading into the event.
Dear,
Really
oh
contentious.
dear.
Yeah, the Russians again. Some of their periodized training, they have a fully periodized training block for steroids, which is pretty crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
Periodized training, recommend it. Look into sort of applicable for your sport or your whatever you do, and make it very goal based on either your weaknesses or areas that you need to improve.
Is there? Do we?
A quote of Miyamoto.
Do you reckon
Musashi quote.
Miyamoto Musashi used to periodize his training when he was chopping people up?
Sure. Are you?
I reckon he prepared for certain battles.
60 duels, right? He must have prepared differently.
Well, he used different tactics,
Yeah.
depending on who he was in battle with.
Musashi can actually help with a bit of periodization. Can we not?
Yes, we can, Hal.
Yeah.
Good segue. We have recently launched our Musashi Performance Lab on our website, musashi.com. Sign up to the Performance Lab and get free training and nutrition programs for your sport. Sound like a radio announcer.
Whole bunch of sports, yeah.
So they are periodized programs.
Yes, and these training programs are broken down into off, during, and pre-season. They're all written by one Tom Boach, coach ambassador, aka Prime Train.
Yeah, and
shout out to Tommy.
all nutrition programs are written by Musashi sports dietitian Gwen Gothard, who's been with the brand for a very long time. So yeah, jump on the site, check out those training programs and nutrition programs for your sport.
Highly recommended.
Yeah.
And what have you got, Dhiren?
I just opened the book and it came to a applicable quote. So
Here we go.
Oh, it's funny how that happened.
Miyamoto
Why did you have a
Musashi-
page mark?
okay, there's no difference between walking and running into battle or walking and running in everyday life, except for speed. Proper movement of the body depends entirely on the manner in which you carry yourself.
I think it's a stretch.
I don't mind it.
I don't know.
Try and find the link, everyone. I couldn't.
Yeah.
But I like
Did
it.
you say stretch?
All right, guys.
Wrong topic.
All right.
Until the next episode.
Musashi out.